So good morning. We're going to go ahead and start. We had that 15-second delay because a lot of our viewers are getting forced by YouTube to watch a commercial before they see us. So they made a request. Again, as usual, we're going to try to adapt and make things easier for the viewer experience. It can be challenging enough watching these things. So let us know. And again, Joe, I hope you'll let us know how that worked today. Today we're going to be talking about a very interesting topic. It was brought up by 147 Degrees West. For those of you who don't know where that is, that's in Alaska. This is one of our Alaska viewers, very smart lady. She raised the issue of coronavirus attacking the T cells in the immune system. And there's another extremely well-known pandemic virus that does that too. Now, the mechanisms appear to be slightly different. We'll cover that a little bit later. And obviously, the disease is totally different. It's obviously caught in totally different ways. It's a very different virus. COVID-19 is a very acute disease, whereas HIV is a very, very long-term type of thing. As a part of this, we'll get into a video. Chris found us a great video that goes into the visuals of what T cells actually do. And this is, now there are a lot of types of T cells. This is a video specific to how a killer T cell works. And what's a killer T cell? We'll talk about that again at the end of the feature for today. Upcoming topics: which states are doing enough COVID-19 tests, and maybe some more information about COVID-19 testing. As you know, we're eyeball deep now in terms of helping a lot of employers get a lot of employees back into the economy. I was talking with, given what I do, I end up talking with a lot of people. I was talking with a fellow from Hopkins last week and someone from Harvard this week who's also eyeball deep in this use of testing to get people back to work. There's a lot of developments that are going to be coming up with the antibody test. You know, you hear right now, antibody test, oh, it's awful. Right now, what we have available is pretty bad. But what you're probably going to end up seeing in the pretty near future are antibody tests that have more of a titer effect. Titer, not T-I-G-H-T-E-R, but T-I-T-E-R, meaning how much of that antibody do you have? How effective is that antibody? In other words, being able to grade people like 1 through 5. They have very effective, a lot of antibody, or 1 where this antibody's still kind of iffy. The other thing that is already becoming, getting online, at least in research areas and research institutes, is an antibody titer that looks at IgM or IgA, IgM, and IgG. Now, for many of us, that might be confusing. Here's what you'll usually find: IgA, then IgM, then IgG as the long-term, very effective antibody. So, like we said, it's never simple. It's always a little bit more complicated, but we'll cover those items in upcoming videos. In previous videos, if you have interest, we've covered is it safe to take out this blood clotting? A lot of information about the blood clotting activities that have come up recently. Oh, by the way, Carl, if you could let Chris know on an upcoming topic, I let him know this morning, we need to have one quick slide on the Fauci announcement about remdesivir. Bottom line on remdesivir is that, yeah, it does appear to be helpful. We'll provide you a little bit more information on it. Looked like it cut the time in hospital for very serious COVID-19 cases by about a third. And it decreased the mortality, the death rate, by maybe a quarter. So again, it's not going to pull us out of this epidemic and save us, but some good news anyway. We'll cover that a little bit more in the future. Again, on previous topics, pulse ox is pulse oximetry something that's available to all of us? Is it something that we can use to make sure that we're not getting into really bad shape and don't know it? Pregnant women, there's some more information coming out about kids. We've covered kids a couple of times. We'll cover them again in the future. And just what does immunity to coronavirus mean? That immunity to coronavirus, that gets back to the topic I was talking about a few minutes ago. The developments in terms of looking at the antibody. And of course, the perennial topic that a lot of people love to hate, and that is conditions for ending lockdown. A lot of politicization, and I think I said that right. A lot of debate over ending lockdown. So before we get started, just a quick couple of items about resources that we have available. Michelle's developing a CIMT webinar. There are a lot of people out there that have gotten CIMTs from Todd Eldridge, from David Meintz, from Doug Thompson, all of whom have appeared on this channel. But you go to their seminars, you get a CIMT, you take it to your doc. Your doc doesn't know what it's about. We're going to help you. We're going to develop a very affordable webinar way to watch this. Excuse me just a minute. Joe Riley's out in the audience, and he's giving us some up-to-date information. Okay, well, Joe, we'll try to continue to work on that delay to make sure that we get it where you need it to be. The webinar is will be available soon to help you interpret your CIMT. If you took it to your doc and your doc said, I don't know anything about these are no good, and tossed it, you may be missing a huge opportunity to save a couple of decades of healthy life. A lot of questions about the book. No update for today on it, but we will keep you posted on it. I expect at least another month before that thing gets published. And again, a lot of life-saving information, like if you're depending on a stress test to warn you about an upcoming heart attack, a lot of people do that. A lot of people did that. Tim Russert did, several other people who are dead. So don't depend on a stress test. Insulin resistance, another webinar available on, this is the number one thing that's killing us. Whether we're talking about COVID-19 or heart attack, the number one thing that's disabling us, if you're talking about stroke, insulin resistance. And the vast majority of insulin resistance, as in over 90% of it, is unrecognized. So there are ways to find these things out. That's the whole purpose of this channel. And for those of you who have problems reaching a doc, again, we've got access. I'm getting more and more, my time is getting more and more taken up with some of these return to work programs. We're developing software, et cetera. But if you have a real need, again, we are available. So we'll get to the coronavirus attacking our immune system like HIV right after Carl hits us with this water ball. Carl? So this was, that's not USA Today. What is that? I remember I read these things like 2 or 3 days ahead of time. Well, this is a recent article on this. This is not the article I read. I usually read more of the academic stuff, but this is in Today magazine somewhere. I'm not familiar with that one, Chris. But the topic, again, has already been covered in several of the more academic journals. Coronavirus attacks the immune system like HIV. The number of T cells could drop significantly in COVID-19 patients. That's been reported by a respected institute of immunology. I've seen it, again, it's been published in some of the academic journals. The lower the T cell count, the higher the risk of death, which makes sense when you begin to think about what these T cells do. It's at least one of the major functions going on here is crippling our defense systems. This was later confirmed by autopsies on over 20 patients whose organ damage is, and again, don't want to confuse this and AIDS, very different diseases, but when you look at some of the organ damage on autopsy, it's similar to some of the organ damage that you do see with AIDS, and also some of the organ damage that you see with SARS. When you consider SARS, very related, another coronavirus, and not surprising at all. It's unfortunate that we didn't get the warning from the previous SARS epidemic. So here's one hypothesis. COVID-19 could kill the powerful immune cells that are supposed to kill the coronavirus, just like HIV and SARS. Now, these observations coincided with a surprise discovery by Shanghai and New York researchers who studied SARS-CoV-2 in T cell lines. So they found that SARS-CoV-2 preys on T cells. How? The spike protein on SARS-CoV-2, it creates a fusion. And that spike protein, that appears to be the function of it, to latch on to a cell so they can start that syringe thing where the SARS-CoV, I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm going to try anyway now that I'm started. So this is the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and these are the spike cells, and this is a regular cell. The purpose for these spike cells appears to be to latch on and then create some junction or union between the two cells, so SARS-CoV-2 can then inject the genetic material, the RNA, which is enclosed in the protein, into the host cell. So what they're saying is, I mean, almost all viruses do the same thing. That's how viruses work. They're little biological syringes with very bad medicine inside. That medicine takes over the genetic material, in this case an RNA, and in most viral cases RNA. That genetic material hijacks our genes, or the genes of the host cell, and turns it into a manufacturing unit of those viruses. Now, again, that spike, any of the spikes that you see on the outside of these cells almost always are going to be spikes that help create that union between the virus and the host cell. The virus's genes then enter the T cell in disabling the T cell's function. Now, the original SARS virus didn't appear to prey on T cells like SARS-CoV-2. Now remember, we also said SARS-CoV-2 impact on a T cell is not the same as what you see with HIV, and I said we were going to cover that later. This is where we talk about that. Unlike HIV, SARS-CoV-2 doesn't replicate inside T cells to generate more viral copies to infect other T cells. In other words, for HIV-2, the T cells do appear to be one of the key host cells that turns into a manufacturing center for HIV virus. For SARS-CoV-2, it doesn't appear that the T cell is that kind of host. It's just killing the T cell, meaning the T cell and the SARS-CoV-2 just both die when it infects one of the T cells. It's turning other cells into those manufacturing units. Now, I mentioned we were going to show a video. Don't show it quite yet, Carl. Let me explain something here. This video is more about cancer. These killer T cells are responsible for protecting us from many things, cancer being one of the most important items. And in fact, as you know, most cancers happen as we get older and older. And one of the reasons for that is we start getting breakdowns as we get older, into our 60s and 70s, of different parts of our immune system. Carl, why don't you show that video?
Inside all of us lurks a serial killer. A killer whose primary function is to kill and then kill again. These are cytotoxic T cells, a specialized member of our white blood cells. They patrol our bodies, identifying and destroying virally infected and cancer cells. And they do so with remarkable precision and efficiency. There are about 5 million T cells in a teaspoon of our blood, engaged in the ferocious and unrelenting battle to keep us healthy. These amorphous blobs move around quite rapidly, pushing out their leading edge and probing their environment as they go. When a cytotoxic T cell finds a cancer cell, membrane protrusions rapidly explore the surface of the cell, checking for the telltale signs of cancer. They kill their targets using poisonous proteins visible here in red. These cytotoxic granules move down special pathways in the cell called microtubules to the interface between the T cell and the cancer cell. The T cell punctures the surface of the cancer cell and delivers its deadly cytotoxins. This is very important in our bodies, where cells are packed together, as it focuses the lethal hit on the target and minimizes collateral damage to the neighboring healthy cells. The fate of the cancer cell is sealed. The T cell then moves on, hungry to find another victim.
So thank you, Carl. We'll get started with Q&A. Remember, I think, it was James Cantor who said, sometimes, Brewer, you're not great with transitions. And I know that. I am the world's worst at a lot of things. And transitions may be one of them. So what Carl did was develop this little transition thing that says, okay, guys, we're transitioning from the feature program for today to the Q&A. So I hope that looked pretty clear to me. Hope that got what you needed, James. And thank you for the suggestion, because every one of these suggestions like that just makes us better, assuming we can actually respond to it. Sometimes it takes us a while to respond to some things, like video quality. It takes years for us to make some improvements in the video quality side, but we're making another set of improvements now in that space. And actually, I'll mention one of these a little bit later. We've got a question about berberine. We've got we're looking to get a higher quality level of video out. I've got one coming out over the next, I don't know, maybe a week or two on David Sinclair. And we've got another one in the works on berberine. It's a 2020 update on berberine. And no, berberine's not a sugar substitute. Berberine is good, though, if you got the sugar, if you've got glucose metabolism problems. So Bart, thank you for joining. Appreciate your comment, and good to see you here. Robert Simpson, hello, Mr. Genius. Thank you very much. These dorky looking glasses are trying to make, well, anyhow. Thank you, Robert. Sylvia Millions, want to see David Icky. Not sure what that is. Douglas Pohl, Sinai ICU doc treatment is counterintuitive. To use anti-inflammatories to suppress body mounting a superimmune response to COVID-19 to prevent on system from attacking organs has not lost the patient. It may be counterintuitive. Well, it's not counterintuitive, Douglas. At least, I mean, I'm not specific with I'm not familiar with this specific example. In fact, I don't know which one you're talking about. But we use anti-inflammatories in the ICU all the time. Once you start getting into that level of disease, intensive organ shutdown, organ breakdown, things like DIC, disseminated intravascular coagulation, where we're just clotting way too much. Quite often, the initiating problem, and that's happening with COVID-19, or even a later problem, is that our immune system just goes haywire and starts creating inflammation. That inflammation makes it difficult or impossible for us to breathe, as well as several other things. So use of steroids. Steroids are the ultimate anti-inflammatory, and use of steroids is a big deal within the ICU. So again, I know sometimes when I redirect an answer, I find out later on that there was a specific, unique question around that, and there very well may be. If that's the case, Douglas, hopefully you can help clarify for me what it is. Robert Simpson, LA is now testing everyone regardless of symptoms. We got to get more testing out there. I'm glad to hear anytime we're getting more of that out there. Thank you for sharing that, Robert. Sylvia Malios, we want to see Anonymous, great topic. Thank you. Well, you're very welcome, Anonymous. Thank you for your comments. IgM, new infection. IgG, you had it possibly still do, depending on IgM. Not exactly. I mean, I think you're obviously, I get the point about the sequencing, IgA, IgGM, IgG, and IgG is the more permanent one. If you get a reinfection, usually you go straight to IgG. That's why reinfections, even when you have even if you get disease from reinfection from a virus, you usually don't get that bad. And that's one of the clarifications around the difficulties of building a vaccine. People will say, oh, well, you might get reinfected anyway. If you look at other coronaviruses, there have been 2 studies in terms of looking at other coronaviruses, other ones that cause routine cough and cold during, seasonal cough and cold. And in those, one of them didn't totally prevent any new infections, but it did decrease the duration and seriousness of further infections. That was because the person had already developed IgG, and so you didn't have to go through that 2-week wait period to go through this sequencing. You already went immediately or much more quickly to IgG. They didn't totally eradicate it like it often will, because it took a few days to get those IgGs geared up again. I hope that dealt with your comment. Anonymous, GP120, GP41. Furin always, I'm not sure. Again, sorry, Anonymous, can't understand. Dave Murphy, $5. Dave, you have been a great example for the rest of us out there in viewer land. I do appreciate it. And it gives me an opportunity to explain what this is all about. Obviously, I'm a physician. I started off in ER and emergency room, and became frustrated very quickly that the vast majority of things bringing people into the ER are things that should have been prevented for 20 years, if not indefinitely, including heart attack and stroke. The vast majority of things that are killing us and disabling us are things that we don't need to be having. And it's because medicine is geared into not prevention, but treatment. Well, if you wait to have your heart attack or your stroke, and then you want a treatment to get you out of the problem, that's just not going to work. So I went to Hopkins to get training in prevention. That was the best place to get it at that time. ended up loving it, did well, ended up running the program in prevention there. I've gone through my career. I've retired a couple of times, but I still just have I see so many, it's still the same case where most disease, death, and disability is preventable. You see, you see a lot of that with COVID-19 as well, just like with heart attack, just like with stroke, just like with kidney disease, blindness. And we're just not getting the word out there effectively. So here's the bottom line. I am now spending, again, most of my time working to get this information out there. I've committed to myself and to Janice, that my wife, that I'm not going to eat up our retirement money. I have used a good bit of it for that, but any little bit that you guys can help is fantastic. It really does help. Carl, Lori, some of the other staff are from the Philippines, and $5 contribution makes a big difference. There are a couple of ways to do it. One is Patreon. We've gotten a significant increase in Patreon activities over the recent few months with COVID-19 and the work that we're doing. You can also do it through Super Chat like Dave Murphy is doing. Thank you again, Dave. I appreciate that. Janice and Cedric Lumsden. I'm on Xarelto. Would this cut down on clotting problems with COVID-19? Here's the thing, let me ask you this. Have you ever heard this before? We don't know yet. But when we covered that, I made the comment that I'm on, when we covered the clotting problems, I'm on a second or a first cousin to Xarelto. I'm on Eliquis. Actually, a lot more of us as we get older should be on it. Most of us that have atrial fibrillation don't know it. It's like the situation with prediabetes, insulin resistance. Most of us that have it don't know it. And most of us that have paroxysmal atrial fibrillation or silent unknown atrial fibrillation, or I won't go further. Most of us that have that need to be on these drugs. As someone else pointed out, yes, they're very expensive, but there are ways to get expensive drugs much less expensively. I personally am a poster boy for that. And during times when we didn't have the greatest insurance because of my on again, off again retirements, I actually went through one of those programs for the Eliquis. It's a great program. Douglas Pohl referenced Dr. Thomas Yadiger is the ICU director at Providence Cedars-Sinai Tarzania Medical Center. Thank you very much, Douglas. Ivermectin versus remdesivir. Well, given the recent stuff that came out on remdesivir, my money's on remdesivir. But would I take my bets off the table on ivermectin? No, not at all. I don't think. I mean, it's. I don't know. Well, I don't know that they're competitive. I think we still need to wait and see what happens with ivermectin. Anonymous, any report on NAC effectiveness in COVID-19? I haven't seen any. If anybody else has seen it, I'd love for you to fact check and provide us some information on it. We're getting a lot of comments because when we do that, the comment thing I hit the comments and we go flying past. So I may miss a few. If I do, let me know. And sorry about that. Eeyore, what is the role of thymus gland in the equation? That's a great question. You know, the thymus starts out as one of the major originators of a whole lot of our T cell and other immune functions. What is the role in terms of COVID-19? I don't know. I mean, we know that it's far more active during the early developmental years and far less active as we get older, but it doesn't go away. So it's a good question. I don't know the answer, Eeyore. Great name, by the way. Jim Hyde, good morning, Dr. B. You are the best with the information you provide. Wish you were my doc. Do you think berberine is effective as a sugar supplement? So this is the comment that I made earlier about berberine. And again, we've got a video coming out. Berberine is not a sugar supplement. I have recently transitioned over to palatinose, based on some advice by one of our very smart viewers, Aura Ruth. And because I can't find the right kind of palatinose, I started trying monk fruit, and monk fruit is great. At the end of the day, you have to ask how much you should be eating. You should be teasing those sweet receptors in your palate anyway, and maybe start calming that down. One of the best ways to do that. Here I am, 62 years old, and I've struggled with a sweets addiction for, I don't know, at least 55 of those years, and have struggled many times trying to back off, go cold turkey. I will tell you this, and obviously I haven't totally gone cold turkey forever, but I've got it pretty much under control. And one of the key reasons, the key tool I just discovered about 2 years ago, Gymnema sylvestre. And we've got several different videos on Gymnema. For those of you who are also trying to deal with a sweets addiction, take a look at Gymnema. And the brand doesn't matter. I get a big bag of it every couple of months. I just get it on Amazon. Gymnema sylvestre. It's a powder. I put it in my coffee in the morning. I also take a Gymnema pill. Gymnema actually acts in your on sweets receptors in your palate, your tongue, which is I think mostly in the back and the side. It acts on some sweets receptors in the gut, and it acts on some central sweets receptors up in your brain as well, I believe. So Chuck K. Oh, by the way, Jim, who says I can't be your doc? I mean, I'm licensed in over 40 states. Which state are you in? And I doubt very much. I mean, I'm not licensed in Hawaii. So if you live in Hawaii, yeah, I can't be your doc. But actually, I've seen some people from Hawaii too. So take a look. Check it out. Chuck K. I asked my doc for an inflammation panel and OGTT. He said they can't do a plaque 2 test. Could you put together a list of questions we can use when trying to find a good health care provider? Chuck, I've had that question a few times. I'm conflicted over that issue. Here's the problem. Let me just tell you this. Number one, as I've said, I have got time. I've got interest in seeing folks, so check us out. Number two, if you look at the Bale-Duneen network, that's one of the best networks for finding docs that know this space. But here's the problem with that. I spent a lot of time. Brad was in my office for a couple of years, and I spent a lot of time in that community. So many of the Bale-Duneen docs have gone to one weekend of a Bale-Duneen thing, and then they come home to their office and they say, we're going to do all this, we're going to do that. And it doesn't work. It fails. It doesn't work well in a typical type of office practice. The other thing that happens is even within the Bale-Duneen practices, you still get too little focus on insulin resistance, much more focus on inflammation. And cardiovascular inflammation is important, but the root cause, you got to go to the root cause of what's causing this. And like I've said, 80% of the time it's insulin resistance. If you've got insulin resistance, you need more than just to be told you have insulin resistance. You need to actually deal with it, and that becomes a big, big issue. Eeyore, the mechanism reminds me of Velcro surfaces. Yes, very interesting. Very, very interesting. No Trash in Heaven, a $10 donation. Thank you thanks to you and Janice. I'll tell Janice that. I'll also tell her I think she needs to appear more. She not sure why she doesn't. I think she thinks it's an ego-driven exercise to provide this kind of information because you're up there in front of a camera. Jose Fontal, I have elevated blood pressure, paroxysmal atrial fib, though I haven't had an episode in 2 years, and I'm 49 years old with a 0 calcium score. Would I be considered as having a pre-existing condition and related to COVID-19? Jose, I would. A lot of people wouldn't, and it's because I look at far more subtle problems with what I would almost call like a paroxysmal prediabetes. I see tons and tons of people, especially in their late 40s, early 50s, who are starting to get some of this prediabetes problem. Not enough to where sometimes it doesn't even show up on OGTT. Quite often it won't show up on OGTT, but it will show up on an insulin survey. It's just unusual to have paroxysmal atrial, well, blood pressure. There's a reason that blood pressure is so related to prediabetes. I believe it's because a major part of blood pressure, although we call it unknown origin, I think quite often it's from AGE, not that kind of age, but advanced glycation end products. The most common, most well-known advanced glycation end product is hemoglobin A1C. Hemoglobin A1C is nothing but the hemoglobin protein where glucose has bound to it, covalently, meaning it won't unbind. These proteins that are normal proteins in our body, when you have too much glucose, you get too much binding of glucose to those normal proteins. Those are called AGE. Now, AGE will actually, what they do is they gum up the works in the filter program for the kidneys. You know, each kidney is about 1 million filters. The docs call them glomeruli. Don't need to remember that term. It's a filter. It's just a filter membrane where the blood goes through and wastes filter through, but the rest of the blood remains. That then becomes your urine. Guess what the filter membrane is? It's the intima, the lining, that delicate lining of the artery wall. That same, we test for that. We test for microalbumin creatinine ratio. That's testing for micro amounts of albumin, the most common protein in our blood, in our serum. And here's why. If you have that protein leaking through that filter membrane in the kidney, you probably have, that's the most important sign of inflammation. You probably have cholesterol leaking through the lining of your artery wall. That's what plaque is. Plaque is not cholesterol just gumming up the inside of the artery. It's cholesterol going through the lining of the artery wall. It won't go through the next layer, the medial layer, so it gets stuck. That's what plaque is. Thank you for the discussion, and pardon me if that was too much of a bunny hole, but again, that bunny hole was a core message for this this channel, and a core message that people aren't getting, that's resulting in the major cause of death, major cause of disability in our world. John Tocho, crystal clear transition, but the old way didn't bother me. Thank you, John. I appreciate that. And actually, John looks like, I don't know if that's a picture of John gave us a $5 super chat somewhere. Thank you very much, John, for doing that. We appreciate that. Thank you, Doc, for all you do. I'm so curious about that picture. It's so characteristic. Is that an ancestor, or is that you when you were younger, or who is that? In fact, we got another one here from Joe Riley. Back at you, Dave. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Joe. Joe tries to get a little competition going. And again, it really does help. It helps a lot. We appreciate it. Now let's go back and see if we can find, well, this is from 147, Barbara, 147 degrees west. Every time I look at the spike protein on the SARS-CoV-2, I think about the passage in David Sinclair's book, about using a virus to renew cells. Not sure. Again, I just redid more of a high-end edited, much more of a general public type video on David Sinclair. I don't remember that quote though. It was a great book. I've got a whole series on David Sinclair's book with about 8 videos talking about, yeah, we should, I mean, we can live to 120. There's an old Jewish blessing that says, may you live to 120. And his point, his goal is that we should take the hyperbole out of that. Take the hyperbole out. In other words, make it such that it's not a big deal to live to 120. And here's the thing, you may not believe it, but it clearly should not be a big deal for us to, right now we expect to live to our 60s and 70s. We should have an expectation that we live to our 90s. You read David Sinclair's book, Lifespan, makes a really good case, and he's right that we should have an expectation that it should be 90 and healthy. He goes into a lot of details. He actually came up with the term, or with a new theory, which I think is very, very helpful in terms of aging. It's the information theory. It's where basically he looked at groups like the Werner syndrome folks. And what was happening is the DNA is just getting, instead of being packaged and well managed like it usually is in the cell, it starts getting strewn about like a cat found a vacuum packed bubble wrap thing of yarn and just started tearing it open, and then the yarn starts flying everywhere. That's what happens in Werner syndrome, folks. And I'd love to show you a picture. Actually, let me see if I can show you a quick picture of Werner syndrome kids, because again, it's a very interesting thing that you find. And let me, hold on, Carl, let me make sure that I've got a share. Okay, so let's go, let's make sure. Are we on my share? Can you see it, Carl? If you look
Yes,
up, I'm sorry, can you see it?
yes.
Okay, so if you start looking at these pictures, you see that these people age dramatically. You get 15-year-old kids. Here's one of them, 15-year-old kids that look like 80-year-olds, 10-year-old kids. And that's Werner syndrome. It's when you get into this problem where your DNA starts, you lose control of the information that drives the protein and the proteins in your, that are critical to your health. So very interesting book. And again, another bunny hole. Barb, 147. I hope you don't mind me using that first name. By the way, thank you for covering the killer T-cell topic. You're very welcome. Thank you for suggesting it. LCHGL, the only war going on is the war on the people and the Bill of Rights by the oligarch. It's a little too political for me, Louis Shea, what about coconut oil? What about coconut oil? Louis, coconut oil has been one of my more popular videos. It's like 3 years old. Pardon that. That coconut oil video is about 3 years old. And here's the thing. The American Heart Association came out again saying coconut oil is dangerous for you. You look at the other side of that debate, and a lot of folks are saying, no, it's healthy. And I will tell you, I use several different types of coconut oil myself. So what's that tell you about my opinion? Ashraf Mohammed, just thank you, respectable scientist. Thank you very much for your recognition, Ashraf. Louis Shea, can coconut oil make the difference? Now, if you're implying that it's going to make a difference in terms of COVID-19, I don't know about that. But I think it does. I think it is I don't agree with the American Heart Association about it being that much of a risk. Bob Bell just learned via my CGM that Janice was talking about this morning. We had an ad about to go out talking about CGM. You think a lot of people are going to recognize that term? Probably not. Continuous glucose monitoring. So the oral steroid prednisone raised my glucose by about 40 points when first introduced at 5 times 10 milligrams on day 1. Others should take note. There's absolutely no question, Bob. Steroids, oral steroids, increase your blood sugar. No question at all about that. So obviously you don't want to be taking steroids for no big reason. Now, I would add one other thing. What about cortisol? Cortisol is a major problem in terms of increasing blood sugar, and cortisol goes up. So for example, if you talk about sleep, if you can have a bad night's sleep, not so much that you would even notice it, but have a bad night's sleep is recorded in a sleep lab, you will end up being, quote, insulin resistant, have increased blood sugars over the next 48 hours. So hopefully that helps you begin to understand the importance of sleep in managing our blood sugar, and therefore in managing heart attack and stroke prevention and blindness prevention and all those other things. Robert Simpson, what do you think about Ozempic? I'm not familiar with Ozempic. I've had several. Somebody needs to send me a reminder to look up Ozempic. Sorry, I haven't looked it up yet. Jackie Shaheen, I'm going through all of your older videos to avoid asking questions you may have answered already. Thank you very much, Jackie. I appreciate that. Here's one of the things we did. If you will email us about a specific question that you have, quite often we can go in and find a specific video. There's about 900 now, so there's a lot of them. And as they get, especially as they get older, there's one that one of my earlier ones, how I dropped 20 years of plaque. Didn't realize it was going to be such a clickbait kind of title. It has like almost 2 million views. It's starting to plummet now because it's hitting about 2 years old. So the even the most popular videos, the algorithm is pretty difficult about showing some stuff. Carl, if you'll let Chris know about this question, what we need to do is put that out in our next week's email to people to let them know how to find specific email topics. Jerry Kurth did a lot of work to help us help people find a specific email. But thank you very much, Jackie, for bringing that up. James Cantor, Robert Simpson, Ozempic works well for me. So James has shared many times on the channel. Thank you very much, James, for letting Robert know that. Jim Hyde, I'm in Florida. Okay. Now I forgot why I had asked. Oh, well. But thanks. John Tuccio, I really like monk fruit. And Lacanto has an organic version of monk fruit. Amazon and Whole Foods sell an organic liquid by Now Foods. The kind that I have, I got on Amazon. It's a big bag, and it's a powder. I think it's organic, but I'm not quite as organically driven as a lot of folks. I did some post-grad genetic stuff at Stanford and used to work with a genetics program. Maybe not going to go there. James Cantor, Robert Simpson was able to bring hemoglobin A1C to 5.4%. I still take metformin, ER, 500 milligrams twice a day. Thank you again for sharing that, James. You know, when you share your experience, James has already obviously shared multiple times that he has this problem and what he does for it, just as he has a couple of times today. And when you share with others what you're doing, it helps immensely, because it's one thing to listen to some doc who gives maybe too much theoretical and technical stuff. Something very, very different to hear from someone else another non-medical person talking about their own experiences. Dave Murphy, I'm sorry. Is there a difference between Gymnema leaf powder and Gymnema sylvestre? No. Gymnema sylvestre is the complete name of the genus and species, I think. And Gymnema leaf powder is, I mean, it's just the dried leaves of the Gymnema sylvestre plant, which have been ground up. And that's what I put in my coffee. And that's what usually what you're going to get if you take a capsule. It's going to be a capsule full of the dried powder. Just put it into a capsule. Anonymous, thank you from the heart for answering our questions, Dr. Brewer. Well, thank you very much for the recognition. GP41 and GP120 are alleged protein spikes in HIV used. Oh, okay. Used by at least one major strain of SARS-CoV-2. I didn't know that. You know, this is one of those things where, like you say, you learn the darndest things from other people. SARS-CoV-2 using furin to infect as well. I don't know. That's very, very interesting. Thanks, John. We just not sure where. Okay, here we go. Robert, what are your thoughts on pravastatin? Pravastatin is really good. You know, if you go back 4 or 5 years ago, Crestor was still, it had not lost its patent. It was very expensive. Although there were some rumblings about pitavastatin, Livalo, it was just prohibitive. And so what we would do is we would get a thing called KIF6. It's a genetic predisposition, and it helped us understand, did you have to go ahead and bite the bullet and take a low dose Crestor, or could you take pravastatin, simvastatin? Pravastatin and simvastatin were very, very popular, much more affordable statins. At this point in time, you know, again, rosuvastatin lost its patent a few years ago. It takes about 2 or 3 years for that price to drop. It has dropped, and I just don't use that much pravastatin or simvastatin anymore because, again, we got a little bit better options with Crestor and Livalo. If you're one of those folks genetically, if you've used it in the past, you're comfortable with it, I guess the question is, would I advise switching? And I think I'd need to see your case before I could give you an opinion either way. Am I licensed in Nebraska? I don't know. Michelle can tell us. And Michelle can tell us. And there are other ways we may be able to work some things out as well. Thanks, Joe. John Tuccio, this is John's picture. So here's what it is. It's a picture of my great-great-grandfather. That's a wonderful picture, John. Very characteristic. I know who it is whenever I see it, whether it's on one of our comments on the channel or here. Joseph Page, many of your bunny holes are very informative and often like a bonus. Thank you very much, Joseph. I appreciate that. Dave Murphy, love the bunny holes. Please don't stop. Okay, well, thanks for the encouragement. Be careful what you ask for. Chuck K, love your bunny holes, or your bunny holes usually pearls of understanding. Thank you. Herd Organic Orange Skin had impressive results in lowering cholesterol in some cases, better than statins in at least one study from around 2003. I don't think I've heard of that. Interesting. I wonder if it comes in a different name. No Trash in Heaven. I was taking notes on that last bunny hole. We'll research it later. Thank you. Joe, I see it. Not sure. Robert, some natural ways to boost testosterone. One of the most important ways to boost testosterone is also the most important way to decrease blood sugar problems. Interesting, right? Want to know what it is? Muscle mass and even more importantly, body fat mass. we used to think of fat as an inert energy storage tissue. We were so wrong. It could anything but. It's a hormonal organ. It creates a lot of hormones, and they're almost all bad. It sucks up testosterone in men and decreases testosterone level and function. It creates cardiovascular inflammation. It just does a lot of bad stuff. On the other hand, increased muscle mass helps. So, you know, they say you can't supplement your way out of a bad lifestyle. You can't medicate your way out of a bad lifestyle. You can't do procedures like stents or surgery out of a bad lifestyle. Those are the things. This constant battle to decrease fat and increase muscle mass. As we get beyond our mid-60s, loss of muscle mass becomes as much of a risk factor for cardiovascular inflammation as anything else. So, I mean, I'm a baby boomer. Most of us watching this channel are baby boomers. I can tell. I have the statistics in our analyses, and you got to do the work. You got to go through the pain. Do those high intensity intervals. High intensity interval training was found to be the most important thing in terms of developing and improving mitochondria. Well, speaking of bunny holes, I'll go down one. So Mayo, one of the Mayo clinics actually did some very interesting research. I reported on it a few years ago. I was disappointed that a lot more people didn't see it. They took 30-somethings, 50-somethings, and 70 and 80-somethings, and they did 3 types of exercise. They did this crossover design where you did aerobic exercise for a while, then you stopped, you did resistance training for a while, then you stopped, and you did high intensity interval training. And they actually, what was interesting about this study was they actually did muscle biopsies. Well, what they saw, the biggest increase in mitochondria, in the mitochondria of the muscle, and the mitochondria is, it's the powerhouse. If you go back and you look at what we're talking about with the informational theory of aging, what was interesting about that is it took over from mitochondria. Mitochondria theory of aging has been the most important mechanism known for aging in 50 years. It started coming out in the 50s. The mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. You see our mitochondria begin to die off. You know, it's like an old beat up rusty furnace with embers lying around. So back to that Mayo study. By far, the biggest increase in muscle mitochondria was not with aerobics. It was not with the 20 and 30-somethings. It was with the 80-year-olds. And it was with the 80-year-olds doing high-intensity interval training. So let me repeat that. Biggest increase in mitochondrial muscle mass was with high-intensity interval training in the 80-year-olds. And that says several things. Number one, a lot of this disability that we get in our 70s and 80s is self-generated. We have to keep pushing, and it's not just aerobics, it's not just walks that's going to do that. We have to do high intensity intervals, and we have to do resistance training. Resistance training came up as a close second. And again, this loss of mitochondria as we get into our 60s, 70s, and 80s is not as inevitable as we think. I used to have an old coffee table book about 30 years ago, and it was called Getting Old is Not for Sissies. And what it was this book about people in their 50s and 60s taking up powerlifting and swimming the channel and stuff like that. Now, Janice will tell you I'm the Darth Vader of an evil force in terms of lifestyle. I do have a different approach. I do, tend to jump in with both feet. And like she says, go in gentler, easier, transition slowly. I agree with that. But bottom line is we coddle ourselves too much. We really do need to be pushing hard as we get into our 60s, 70s, and 80s. Now, if you're a 75-year-old and mall walking is your major thing, you know what? That's fine. Start thinking about doing some things where you have some resistance, maybe some dumbbells. You can maybe carry those dumbbells with you. Maybe start doing some resistance training on one of those little bikes at the Y. Start cranking the resistance up and start getting to where you can't talk during high intensity intervals. And again, pushing yourself. That's where you're going to be building mitochondria. I see that we are, we've got a few more. I'm going to see how many we can run through quickly. Anonymous, a major factor in healthy aging, in my opinion, is healthy tap water quality. No question about that. I'm just not a healthy tap water. I don't know a lot of the early details. I know from my training at Hopkins, we actually visited some water treatment areas. And if you look at mankind, poor water has been a major source of death and disease. Anonymous, South has amazing water quality, but there are changes using chloramines too, to say the least. Water filtration plants may need to be looked at. Yep, and then questions about cortisol. Why does prednisone? Prednisone? Not sure. You're not familiar with prednisone, Barbara. Also, Anonymous, we'll look into monk fruit extract tablets. No trash in heaven. Do you eat Brazil nuts for selenium? I hated nuts the early part of my life, and then I started going a little bit more low carb, and I know not all nuts are low carb, but I started getting more into nuts, began to love them, especially macadamia nuts. And then our son, at about age 13, developed a severe tree nut allergy. So that put the kibosh on me eating nuts. When I was eating them, I ate a lot of Brazil nuts. Bart Robinson, Swanson online website is excellent also. Thank you, Barb. Bart. Dave Murphy, look up Ozempic. Thanks, Dave. Turin is an enzyme in us that is thought to cleave the spike protein to allow membrane fusion. Thank you, Mr. Lund. Gymnema sylvestre powder may also be less potent if extract isn't listed. I like bitter melon. I've got a few patients that are taking bitter melon. It's, very, very well-known stuff. Furin, not Turin. Got it. Bart Robinson, coconut oil is also good for frying and sauteing, high smoke point. Sam Furman, after I come back from going out in public, I wash my hands and face. Then I breathe in hot steam to clean mouth, nose, and lungs. Is using the steamer a waste of time? I don't know. I hear a lot of stuff about that. I personally am a little bit more skeptical about it, but I tend to be skeptical sometimes. Kevin McCord, Dr. McCord, good to hear from you. Able to purchase an entire year's supply of rosuvastatin 10 milligrams for $70 cash pay through a U.S. pharmacy. It has become very affordable as a generic product. Thank you, Dr. McCord. Good point. I can get, okay, so Bart's also talking about getting generic Crestor, very inexpensive. CoQ10 is good for mitochondria once in a while, written too. Here's the problem with CoQ10. It's very hard to, unless you do muscle biopsies, it's very hard to understand mitochondrial function. So that's why the research behind CoQ10 is pretty challenging. Bart takes it with some fat in a meal. David Drake, on a max statin dose to lower LDL for known disease. David, here's one of the things I would suggest. Your doctor, and almost all doctors, are going to focus on LDL. I would suggest, if you've got plaque, number one, measure and see how much plaque you've got. Number two, take a look at your OGTT and insulin survey. Really should take a look at that. That's more likely to be causing your problem than LDL level. Well tolerated. Good. What of the anti-statin dose on brain, et cetera? What are your thoughts? I get very few people with significant problems because I rarely go over 5 milligrams on rosuvastatin. Very few of my patients get the kind of side effects from statins because I use a very, very low dose. Barb's on 147 is on CoQ10, and I am too, and I recommend it for anybody taking statin. Elizabeth Montalvo Coulter, do you have any fresh videos on metformin? I know there's those new studies, but you still like it. Yeah, here's the thing. What I've done is I've started pulsing metformin. For example, for a few days a week, I don't take metformin, especially the days leading up to the days when I'm going to be working out. I may have it exactly backwards in terms of timing. I know the studies are saying, look, it may decrease mitochondrial function just a little bit. The other thing I would say is that it's not a concern for a whole lot of, I don't think it's a concern for a whole lot of folks. It may be a little bit more of a concern for the quote younger, quote healthier baby boomer who's really pushing physical performance. Those are the guys I think that it may be significant for them. Bart Robinson, good idea, 147. I agree. Thank you so much, guys. We're going over an hour here. A lot of really good comments, really good thought. Thank you for your interest.